what we're really doing in Chinese medicine is you're facilitating and supporting the body's natural healing process.
Yeah.
It's not just a Chinese idea that the body can heal itself. Everyone knows that, because if you're a kid and you scratch yourself, you watch the scratch mend and heal. You don't do anything. So all the organs work together. The kidneys have a relationship to the liver. If the kidneys aren't working, it can affect the liver. The liver has an impact on digestion. So if you have problems with the liver, it can affect digestion. If your digestion is off, then you're not getting the nutrients you need, so you can get really fatigued. So now the whole system is disintegrating. All Chinese medicine is about the restoration of integrity. The pharmaceutical system was created by businessmen. So it's how do we make money, right? And so what we have now is a system. It's not really healthcare, it's disease management.
Right, absolutely.
And you've got to look at what are the financial incentives. The financial incentives are in managing symptoms of disease in sick people.
Yeah.
There's no money to be made in dead people or healthy people. The money's in the middle, but that still directs a lot of the thinking of Western medicine, which is really about crisis management and symptom management.
So let's start with the beginning and the differences between traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine, because there seems to be many more people getting into traditional Chinese medicine, but they still have a traditional allopathic understanding like I did. Like even I, when I was writing these questions, you know, a part of it I was starting to ask like, oh, if you have this ailment, what type of herb can you give me to fix that ailment? But that is still on the same philosophy of allopathic medicine. So I already know I already have a misunderstanding of it. Could you explain the differences between Western and traditional Chinese medicine?
Yeah, I mean, basically the goal of any medical system, doesn't matter where it comes from, is you're trying to maintain homeostasis.
Yeah.
And that's just a state of stability or a consistency despite external changes. So it's the ability to stay cool when it's hot outside, the ability to warm up when it's cold outside so you don't freeze. So that all starts, the foundation of that is to maintain a sense of internal stability and balance. So the internal environment needs to be stable so that it can adjust. So it doesn't really matter whether you're doing Ayurvedic or Chinese medicine or Western medicine or whatever. The goal is to help you stay alive and maintain that steady state, right? Now, where that kind of differs between the Western approach and the Eastern approach is where the two systems started. And all medicine evolves out of a historical context, so historical events affect it. Culture, how does that culture see the world in general? Religion also is involved. So Chinese medicine was influenced by a lot of Taoist stuff, which is not really a religion, it's a naturalistic science. Buddhism plays a small role in there, Confucianism, and Confucian theories came about during a time of turmoil in China when they were trying to establish order. And that was about creating hierarchies and roles of different ministers of government. And so that kind of theory and philosophy of trying to establish order to society was also applied to how do you establish order
in your body,
within the human body. Western medicine also influenced by religion, by history, by its own culture. But where really Western medicine that we know it now really started was the study of disease and death. So they started studying dead bodies.
Oh, really?
Disease bodies, because they're trying to understand the body. So they're doing dissections on dead bodies, right? To look at the organs and to look at what's happening. And then obviously they were trying to respond to disease, which a lot of medicines are. Whereas Chinese medicine, the beginning of it, because a lot of the cultural roots are in Taoist philosophy, which is a naturalistic philosophy of how to live in alignment with the principles of nature, their view of life started with what does life and nature look like when it's in a balanced state and a harmonious state, and how does nature maintain a state of balance and equilibrium. So it's also that understanding that everything has its timing. You can't plant in the wintertime, you got to wait for the spring. Fruit ripens in the summer, not in the fall. So it's understanding that all of nature has its cycles and we are part of nature. So we have our cycles there as well, whereas Western view really saw us as apart from nature, separate from nature.
From its beginnings, from its inception.
From its beginning. It was looking at least what we have now in terms of Western medicine was probably a little more holistic before the industrialization and of medicine and the pharmaceutical model came in. And so where you look at the pharmaceutical system was created by businessmen. So it's how do we make money, right? And so what we have now is a system. It's not really healthcare, it's disease management.
Right, absolutely.
And you've got to look at what are the financial incentives. So the financial incentives are in managing symptoms of disease in sick people.
Yeah.
There's no money to be made in dead people or healthy people.
No.
The money's in the middle,
Yeah.
right? And that's just the financial incentives. In the old days in China, you had your local doctor and you actually paid him kind of like a subscription or a regular fee to keep you well.
Oh, really?
And when you got sick, you stopped paying the doctor because he wasn't doing his job. So it's just a different mindset. From the beginning, Chinese medicine was about health and well-being and using the natural way that the body can heal itself. You're facilitating, supporting that.
Yeah.
Whereas Western medicine was really about crisis management and emergency medicine.
Yeah.
And so still to this point, that would be the strength of Western medicine is in acute care. If I get shot, I'm not going to go to an acupuncturist, right?
No.
But, a kind of emergency care, critical life-saving stuff where you need something you need to stabilize the body really quickly. And at that stage, you're not really worried about the long-term consequences because what matters now is keeping you alive.
Yeah.
But that still directs a lot of the thinking of Western medicine, which is really about crisis management and symptom management.
Yeah,
But
that's their thinking, right?
And that's just because that's where it came from.
Yeah,
that's
where they're coming from on the spectrum of
health.
Yeah.
So they're still, the average doctor doesn't get a full class in nutrition.
Yeah.
So the average Western doctor doesn't really have a concept of health and how to restore health. It's all about how do we manage the symptoms, how do we keep someone alive. So it's very good at crisis management.
Yeah.
It's not so good at chronic disease care.
Yeah.
Which is why you get people just on a lifetime of drugs.
Right.
Right.
Because chronic disease care has its root cause in the lifestyle that the individuals live.
Well, you start with the idea that, the claim to fame of Western medicine was antibiotics, right? People got an infection, they used to die.
Yeah.
So then someone came up with an antibiotic, which is a pill, and now suddenly when someone got an infection, they lived. And so that was like this big leap, because before that, what could doctors really do? They just kind of kept you comfortable. So doctors weren't necessarily a very prestigious profession because they couldn't really save anyone. But now all of a sudden this new drug comes along and you can save a life. Mm-hmm. So then that kind of guides the rest of the development of
pill.
We're looking at, a pill for treatment, but also we're treating critical care, somebody that's about to die, right? And so it kind of evolves from there, but there's still not an integrated model of what health looks like. So in the Taoist philosophy that informed a lot of Chinese medicine, they described what a healthy ecosystem looks like. And so as that got infused into the medicine, from the very beginning, there was an idea of this is what health looks like, and this is what causes things to go awry.
Right.
And so they're just approaching it from two different ends of the spectrum. So now you can see, like somewhere in the middle, that's not that, there's whole schools of Chinese medicine that came out of epidemics, typhoid, cholera epidemics, and people really were dying en masse. And they came up with this book in here, the Shanghan Lun, which is really about the treatment of external disease. And so it's great at that. The herbal medicine is fantastic for treating things like viral and bacterial infections as well.
Really?
But the foundation is how do we return somebody back to health and stability? Whereas Western medicine is very much about how do we keep them alive? Because once we've saved your life and we've stabilized you, there's really nothing that a Western doctor's going to do that says, now this is how you become healthy.
No, right.
So it's not necessarily knock them down, but because the medicine really evolved from a business model, from the pharmaceutical model, and those financial interests influence the research and the education, that's kind of where they're starting from. And so, as I said, at certain points, you want somebody that has some really good acute care, crisis management tools when you're in a crisis.
Yeah.
But then you also need someone that can help guide you back to a state of health and well-being and help you to heal. So I think also with Western medicine, it primarily focused on materialism, which is everything that can be measured.
Right.
So if we can't measure it, we can't see it, it doesn't matter. We're just focused on the material aspects.
Yeah.
But we know now that stress is a major cause of disease, or at the root of a lot of disease. Well, what's stress? Stress is a state of mind. It's a state of consciousness. So our consciousness and our mind and our emotions affect the material.
Yeah.
But Western medicine started with what it could see in a microscope, what it could dissect, what it could measure, and didn't look at the way that our consciousness interacts with the material matter. So it's still very materialistic in that regard.
Yeah. In regards, as we're describing the differences between Western and traditional Chinese medicine, does that mean, like, where in the world is traditional Chinese medicine practiced? Is it China, like, the most?
No, China, Korea, Singapore.
Now, do those
Japan.
people, is there research in healthcare
Yeah,
coming
like,
from that angle?
So Chinese medicine in America is called alternative medicine.
Right.
In China, it's just medicine.
Oh shit, really?
Right.
So they must practice some form of...
Yeah, you go to a hospital and you have one wing that's Chinese medicine and one wing
That's how they
Western
set it
medicine.
up?
Yeah.
Oh shit, why do you know that?
So it's traditional medicine.
For them?
Well, for half the world's population.
Okay, got it.
Right? So you look at things like botanical medicine are really traditional medicine. Pharmaceutical medicine's a latecomer.
Sure.
And a lot of the early pharmaceutical drugs came from plants. But you can't patent a plant.
So they had to come up with
So
something.
you have to find a way to extract the active ingredient from a plant, patent it, because now you have a monopoly on the profits from that plant.
Jesus Christ.
So...
Is that legal to do that?
Of course it is. Yeah. Because, if you have botanical medicine, then with a Chinese medicine formula, you never take one herb. The formulas are maybe 4 or 5 to maybe up to 15 herbs. And they work more together like a recipe. And you have this synergy. So when you're studying the herbs, different herbs will be used differently depending on what other herbs you combine them with. So if you think about cooking, right, you can add salt. Most people think of salt makes food savory. But if you're baking, you can add a little bit of salt and it accentuates the sweet. You just use a smaller amount, right? So even in cooking, the ingredients are used for different reasons depending on what other ingredients you combine it with. Whereas with the Chinese herbal medicine, we do that as well. So dosages change and then what you combine it with change. But it was all using natural substances and the body's innate capacity to heal. So everyone, it's not just a Chinese idea that the body can heal itself. Right. Everyone knows that, because if you're a kid and you scratch yourself, you watch the scratch mend and heal. You don't do anything. You maybe put a Band-Aid on it to keep it clean, but then it heals. So everyone knows the body can heal itself. Right? There's not some revolutionary Eastern philosophy. That's just, everyone knows that. Yeah. But what we're really doing in Chinese medicine is you're facilitating and supporting the body's natural healing process. Yeah. Whereas with Western medicine, it's more focused on the management of the symptoms. And so people come in and say, a classic example was, I have pain, right? And then you give them some kind of medication to numb the pain. But you didn't do anything to treat the underlying cause of the pain. Right. So then in that regard, it might give you some emergency relief from pain, but if you don't address the underlying cause, things just get worse. Yeah. So if someone gets a cortisone shot, cortisone suppresses inflammation. Well, inflammation is your body trying to heal itself.
Right. So creating more blood flow to that area.
Well, it's just part of the natural. So, when you get an injury, the body releases histamine. Histamine dilates the blood vessels, brings immune cells to the area so that it can heal. And so that's the part of the inflammatory process. Now, if you go ahead and put some non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs on that or some cortisone, you're suppressing the inflammation, but in that regard, you're also repressing the repair process.
Yeah, you're stopping the amount of the immune system capability of reaching that area.
Yeah, so, well, it just kind of puts a lid on the fire. So sometimes if the inflammation is too much, the body's gone overboard, you might need to calm the fire down. So it's the same way as if you think about if you're cooking, right? If the flame's too hot, you burn the food.
Right.
You got to have the flame at the right temperature. So in some cases, it may be necessary to calm the inflammation down a bit because it's gotten carried away. But if somebody gets a cortisone shot for some shoulder pain and then they have some pain reduction from that for maybe a month, they haven't treated the underlying cause of the injury. So now when the cortisone wears off, the injury is actually worse than it was when they started. So if you're using acute management tools for a chronic problem, you can end up making the chronic problem worse. And chronic just means it's been longer than 3 months or you've had it for a long time.
Right.
So it's really about having the right approach for the problem, right? Once again, you've been in a car accident and your bones are all shattered and you're bleeding. You're not going to go to an herbalist, right, for some tonic herbs.
Yeah.
You need to go to a surgeon. You need to go to someone that does emergency care. But then once you've had your surgery, the surgeon doesn't know what to do. He just sewed you up. So now he has to send you to physical therapy.
Yeah.
Physical therapist now helps you with the rehabilitation process. And that can maybe take longer if your body's already weak and run down. So then maybe you can add in things like acupuncture and herbs to help support the body's ability to heal itself. So it's not necessarily saying that one modality is superior. It's about understanding the strengths of each modality and when to use each one.
Yeah.
So with Chinese medicine, because the approach was looking at the whole of nature, a whole ecosystem, the approach is holistic. And all holistic means is we see everything as a whole.
Yeah.
That we're not a series of parts. So if you go to a Western doctor, you have a nephrologist, and he just looks at the kidneys, right? And anything wrong with the kidneys. And then the kidneys have a relationship with the bladder and the urethra because that's how you eliminate the fluids that the kidney filters. But the nephrologist doesn't deal with that. That's a urologist.
Yeah.
Right? So you may have urinary issues and go to a urologist, but the urologist doesn't know anything or doesn't treat necessarily how some other part of the body might be contributing to that.
Right.
Right? And then you have a hepatologist that deals with the liver.
Yeah.
Okay? So there's a relationship between the kidneys and the liver. So the kidneys filter toxins, and if the kidney can't filter certain toxins, it backs up and it overburdens the liver. So you could be having liver problems because of something going on with the kidneys. But in Western medicine, you have one guy looks at the kidneys, one guy looks at the bladder, one guy looks at the liver, one guy looks at the heart, one guy looks at the stomach, but none of them have a view of the whole and how it all works together.
Right.
So you may go in and be having one symptom and go to this kind of doctor and he goes, no, I checked everything and everything's fine. And then you go to another doctor and they like, well, we checked that and everything was fine. So structurally and materially, they couldn't find a problem with the individual organs.
Yeah.
But there's a relationship that the organs have with each other.
Right.
And so because Chinese medicine looks at relationships of all the organs in the whole, then you're not just focusing on the symptom, but you're looking at what's the underlying breakdown in the relationship of the body that's causing the symptoms.
Like if it's a band and someone's checking the guitar strings, making the guitar looks good, the bass is good, the drum set is good, but they're just not playing at the same time.
Or it's not plugged in.
Everything in materially.
So the guitar guy goes, my guitar's working fine, I checked it.
Yeah.
And then the pianist is like, well, the keyboard's working fine, I checked that. And then somebody looks behind and goes, oh, we haven't plugged it in.
Got it.
Because they're all connected through the electrical wiring.
Right.
Right? So it's like there may not be anything wrong with the guitar or with the keyboard or with the microphone, but if they're not all linked up and connected, they don't function properly.
Right.
And so...
Is that the meridian lines that connect them, or is that something different?
That's part of it, yeah.
Part of it?
When we look at the whole, right, the whole is integrated. And all integrity means it's consistent, it's connected, it's aligned, right? So for a building to have structural integrity, you have to have a solid foundation, you have to have straight walls, you have to have support beams, and then the roof has to be at the right angle and everything has to be bolted together so that, you know, if you get snow and there's heavy snow on the roof or you get wind, there's some structural integrity to the building because everything's connected and aligned.
Right.
And so the body is also integrated as a whole, right? So all the organs work together. The kidneys have a relationship to the liver. If the kidneys aren't working, it can affect the liver. The liver has an impact on digestion. So if you have problems with the liver, it can affect digestion. If your digestion is off, then you're not getting the nutrients you need, so you can get really fatigued, and that fatigue can relate to cause stress, and then that stress affects the kidneys, and so now the whole system is disintegrating. So instead of being all connected, it's becoming disconnected. So what you're looking at with Chinese medicine is you're looking at the whole being an integral whole, and all disease is the result of the disintegration. So then all healing is about reintegrating everything back to a whole where everything's doing its own job. So it's like any unit. Everyone has to be doing their job for the whole system to work. So
you mentioned like a wristwatch, right? Like,
yeah, so if you've got a watch, you've got a series of cogs and springs and hands, and if you pulled one cog out, the whole thing stops because it's connected through, even though it might not be touching every cog, it's touching this cog that's touching this cog that's connected to this spring. So you pull one piece out and the whole thing stops because it's all integrated. So the same thing is in the body, is because every organ in the body has its responsibility to the whole system. When it starts disintegrating, when one organ isn't functioning properly, or you're having poor communication between the systems, you get disease, you get illness, and that's when the symptoms manifest. So the symptoms are really your body's way of saying there's some disintegration happening. So all Chinese medicine is about the restoration of integrity, right? And so because Chinese medicine views not just the material body, but also the mind and our consciousness, we're restoring the integrity of the whole thing. Whereas if you're doing Western medicine, if you've got anxiety, you go to a psychiatrist. But anxiety being caused by gastrointestinal problems, because if you have, let's say in the small intestine, you have these little things called gap junctions. And they're little gateways that allow small beneficial nutrients to get into the blood so your body can build new proteins. So amino acids come in to build new proteins, fat come in because every cell is coated with a fat layer. And then the larger undigested molecules are kept in the intestines to be eliminated because there's nothing your body can do with that. It doesn't have any value to you, right? Now, if those gap junctions become compromised, which they are in a lot of people, you get larger undigested molecules can leak into the bloodstream. They're not meant to be there. They're supposed to be a protective barrier in the intestines. As it leaks into the bloodstream, the body's immune system recognizes it as a pathogen, which is some kind of external substance or matter or material that's not meant to be there. And it triggers an immune response. And when you have an immune response, you get an increase in stress hormones because the body believes it's under attack. It's been attacked by something that's not meant to be there. So those stress hormones go up, the inflammation goes up, which creates more heat, and that can create a state of agitation and anxiety. So now you go to a psychiatrist saying, I'm anxious all the time, and the problem's not in your head, the problem's in your gut. And the psychiatrist might give you pills to try and suppress the anxiety, but it's not dealing with the underlying issue, which is actually in the gut. And unfortunately, the Western medicine has not created a model of an integrated whole. And so that's where the strength of Western medicine is acute life-saving trauma, but it doesn't have a lot to offer in terms of chronic disease and actually helping someone come back to a state of integration and integrity. It just keeps managing the symptoms over and over. And part of that is because the healthcare has become, it's a bigger industry than the military-industrial complex. So if the financial profits are in disease, you're not going to get health. Just like if the financial profits are in war, you're not going to have peace. And so you have this healthcare system that's actually disintegrated because you've got businessmen making decisions and then imposing those decisions through lobby groups and through policy onto doctors. And the doctors should be practicing healthcare, but a lot of healthcare decisions are made by policymakers, which are bureaucrats and businessmen. And so you've got this dysfunctional, disintegrated system, which is not really healthcare, it's disease management industry. And so with the Chinese medicine, you've got a holistic model that's about how do we facilitate and support the body's natural capacity to heal and get somebody well. And then you have the herbs and the acupuncture and the nutrition and the exercise and everything serve that. And because you see the body as body, mind, what they say, spirit, Shen, consciousness, which is really like the higher intelligence or the innate intelligence of nature, because nature can always keep itself in balance. So you've got to be working on all of those. So there's no physical health, mental health, spiritual health. It's all one system.
Yeah.
So it's all one health. So the classic example that you see now, if somebody has a fearful thought, they're afraid, the body releases adrenaline and cortisol in response to threat. And then what happens is the blood pressure goes up, all the muscle tissues constrict to go into a defensive posture, the breathing becomes rapid and shallow, the digestion shuts down, and things like thyroid function get suppressed, and the blood moves towards the extremities so you can run or fight, so you have lesser blood flow into the organs. And so those are all measurable physical responses, but they all begin with a thought.
Right.
So if someone says, well, look, I'm really not worried about the emotional stuff or any of that spiritual garbage. How do I get healthy? And it's like, but your thoughts, every thought you have releases neurotransmitters and hormones which affect the body.
Physiology.
So if you keep having the same thoughts, you keep having the same physiological response, and then those patterns become symptoms.
Yeah. Does Chinese medicine offer solutions for the mental?
Yeah, because we don't see it as separate. Like, there's no mental health in Chinese medicine. There's health.
Got it. What kind of examples? Because I never even did. Are there psychiatrists or like psychotherapy in Chinese medicine, or?
No, because you're restoring integrity to the whole. So we have this concept in Chinese medicine as the Shen.
The Shen.
And Shen is like your consciousness or the innate intelligence in nature.
Okay.
Some people can interpret that as spirit, but it's kind of that natural aliveness, and it's not personal.
Okay.
Well, we say there's small Shen and there's big Shen. The small Shen is like the ego, so it's our own personal personality, and the big Shen is not personal. It's kind of that animating. This is the mystery in all Western science, is what is consciousness, right? But it's still, even though we can't measure it, we can still see how it affects us.
Yeah.
So it's our ability to connect with each other. Look someone in the eye, see some light in the eyes, see that someone's there. Sometimes you see people that have been severely traumatized. There's just no light in the eyes.
Yeah.
They're just not there. They're not connected. Well, it's that sense of separation that creates a sense of fear. And then fear creates all these adrenaline, cortisol, neurotransmitter responses that affect health. So
a sense of separation from their consciousness or God, or
well, separation from whatever, from everything. If you're separated from each other, you can't make connections with each other. Separated from a sense that, so this is when Chinese medicine started from this view of nature and saw us, we are part of nature. So the principles that apply to nature apply to us because we are nature. We're not this thing walking around in nature. We are nature. We are life. And so that's part of the concept of qi. It's just that life force that animates everything. So there's lots of different kinds of qi. It's a very contextual term, so you can't really translate it into English.
Right.
But it's that kind of life force that flows through everything. I mean, when we eat food, we're consuming its qi. So the sunlight is qi, right? And then through photosynthesis, the plant takes that light in, and then it converts it into sugar, and then we eat the plant to get the energy out of that. So we turn that into adenosine triphosphate, which is our energy storage molecule in the mitochondria. So the plant converts sunlight into fuel, and then we eat the plant and then transform that into a fuel. And so essentially the energy that's within us is sunlight. It's stored sunlight.
Yeah.
Right?
Crazy.
And then when we are doing some kind of activity, the body breaks apart the adenosine triphosphate, and that releases energy into the body, which we feel as heat.
Yeah.
So qi is really, it's kind of an interesting concept. If you look at the character, it's the character of uncooked rice and then steam or vapor.
Uncooked rice and steam mixed
and then,
together?
So the uncooked rice is the bottom radical, and then the radical on top is steam or vapor.
Okay.
So you can't really translate it as energy because it's not really. But in that, you've got this idea that uncooked rice, not cooked rice, and then steam. So it's showing this process of transformation from going from one state to another.
Oh.
So you could see qi as the capacity to transform something, right? Or the capacity to have a transformative process. So when you eat food, you have to chew it, right, to break it down. It mixes with enzymes in the saliva that break down the sugars, swallow it. In the stomach, it hits hydrochloric acid, which pulls apart proteins. Then it goes down to the small intestines, which separates what's useful from what's not. And then we take those useful parts and we bring them into the body to create new cells, to create energy that we store in the mitochondria. So that's a transformative process. And that's all different kinds of qi.
So the only qi I know is the description of energy flowing through the body and then food. Because I know food is a form of qi.
Well, gu qi means food qi. That's kind of...
Oh shit, Gucci?
Gu.
Gu.
Yeah, not Gucci, the clothes.
I was like, Gucci, is that what I think? Okay, gu.
So you have the air qi, right, which is Kong qi. It's just...
Oh, from breathing oxygen?
Breathe in air. So
it's called Kong qi?
Yeah, or the air qi. It's just basically air. Now, what's happening when you breathe in air? You're transforming the oxygen in the air. It's infusing with the blood, and then you're pumping that blood through the body to enliven the body. When blood becomes unoxygenated, it dies, right? So
and that's why a lot of breath work, I mean, it's becoming more popular, but it energizes you.
Yeah, well, when you're not getting enough oxygen, you get really fatigued and sleepy.
Right, yeah.
Right, and what do people say? Oh, no energy. Well, that would be qi deficiency, right? And so, but that can literally be, I'm not getting enough air, I'm not getting enough oxygen. So you get people that sit at a computer and they're slouched over and they're stressed and they're breathing shallow and they're getting really sleepy. What they really need is just oxygen, right? But they'll say, oh, I've got no energy. You say, I've got no qi, right? Now, you eat food and you extract nutrients from food. That would be the gu qi, food qi. So it's the energy or the nutrients you extract from food, and then that gets refined into yin qi, which is associated with blood, and so that's called nutritive qi, or the qi that flows through the blood to nourish the body.
Okay.
So it's this process of transformation, and it's this stuff that enlivens and energizes the body, but it takes different states and different forms.
Beautiful.
Right? It's a very contextual term. So you could describe what kind of weather outside as a type of qi, right? Windy weather or hot weather, and somebody's temperament, if someone's got a lot of angry qi, right? So you can't translate it into one word that means the same thing all the time. It depends on the context that you use it in. But the key in the word, because it's that uncooked rice and the steam, it's a process of transformation. It's something that can be as dense a material as rice and as light and airless as vapor. And the rice radical, the early radical, it was pronounced qi as well. It was a different radical, but it meant that which nourishes the body. So you have these things called homophones in Chinese language, and a homophone is a word that sounds the same, something different.
Sure.
So the qi meant that which nourishes the body, a process of transformation, something that's material and also immaterial, and something that's in this state of change, because the early character was just the radical for clouds. And so when you look up at clouds, you can see them, but you can't really grasp them, and they're always in this state of change. So when you're talking about qi in the body, it's really the body's capacity to do work, the body's capacity to transform and change. And if you don't have sufficient digestive qi, you can't transform food into nutrition, and then you're going to end up fatigued. And then when you're going to say, oh, I've got no energy.
Yeah.
What kind of energy? Well,
how do you measure that? Because I'm assuming you, as a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine, you have to start assessing people to figure out, okay, where is it the Gucci? Is it?
Well, because it's really, you're looking at it's just something in different states. So another way of looking at it is ice, water, and steam is the same thing. It's just in a different state.
Ice, water, and steam. Okay. And that's how when you see a patient or you see someone, you have to understand where their chi is stuck or where it's
yeah.
converting.
Because it should be flowing naturally, right?
Okay.
So if you look at Western physics, the concept is energy is neither created nor destroyed. It merely changes state.
Right.
So ice turning into water is still H2O. It's just in a different state. And then that water changing into vapor, it's still H2O. It's just in a different state. So, you know, the Einstein's description that there's no such thing as matter. What we think of as matter is just energy that's vibrating at a dense enough frequency that we can perceive it through our nervous system, right? So it's just dense energy, right? Because if you look at everything that we think of, it's made of atoms. Well, what's an atom? There's really no matter in an atom. It's just a nucleus with the electrons spinning around the outside, and the electrons are just energetically charged particles, and then they share those to create bonds. So even in what we consider matter, there's not really matter. It's just these energetic particles.
Space, yeah.
So I don't like calling chi energy because there are some parallels, but energy is also a really broad term.
Yeah.
Like what kind of energy?
Right. Chemical energy.
So to say,
energy.
So a Western doctor say, we don't practice energy medicine, we're scientific. Well, what do you think an X-ray is, or an MRI is, or radiation therapy for cancer is? There's energy medicine, right? You're using different energetic frequencies to diagnose or to treat something. So, you know, I don't like using the term energy because it's too broad and it can have so many different connotations. So when you're treating someone, you're just facilitating the body's ability to transform and change and maintain that sense of stability.
So how do you assess that though in a patient?
So,
or is that even a part of your assessment to figure out, all right, what part of their state is
So it starts with asking questions like, you know, why you're here, and then you're looking for patterns. So if someone came in and said, I have headaches, you'd never say, well, here's the headache pill.
Right. That's, you know, as I was writing these questions, I was with that Western.
Yeah. Most people are
thinking like,
right?
What's the Western medicine pill or herb for a headache? But
right. So there's lots of
idea.
reasons you can have a headache.
Exactly.
You can have a headache because you have problems with the kidneys and adrenals. You can have a headache because of issues with the nervous system, which in Chinese medicine would be kind of correlated with the liver. You can have headaches related to digestion and digestive dysfunction. You could have headaches due to just fatigue.
Yeah.
You could have headaches due to posture, where you're cutting off the blood flow. So, you know, the common posture you see with people head forward and then they tilt their head up like that to look at the screen, and they're pinching off the blood vessels so that you're not getting enough blood flow to the head. And now you can have, what's the nature of the headache too? Is it like a dull ache? Is it the whole head? Is it a certain part of the head? Like a sharp stabbing pain is like blood stagnation. So then you got to ask, did you have a head trauma? Right? Are there other signs of maybe stroke or cardiovascular problems? So when you're asking the questions and you're getting all the symptoms, you're trying to discern a pattern. It's kind of like investigating a crime scene and putting things together. Yeah. So you ask questions about symptoms. You know, I have a headache. When do you get them? At the end of the day when I'm really tired, okay? Or
nice.
When I exercise, right? Or I wake up with them. Okay, so now we're starting to put together, after I eat, I get headaches. Or a woman might say, I get them around my menstrual cycle. So then you're looking at the involvement of hormones and blood flow.
Got it.
Right, so you're piecing that together. We have very sophisticated pulse diagnosis where you can feel the pulse, and there are different qualities to the pulse.
Really?
So you can get very nuanced in it, but the easiest way to describe it is you've got a pump and a tube and some stuff that goes through the tube, and then it sits on some ground matter. So by feeling the pulse, you can feel the quality of the pump. So is the pulse steady? Do you get a nice steady rhythm, right? Because if there's an irregular rhythm, you're going to be looking at what's going on with the pump, okay? So like some forms of heart disease, the heart will, if you've got like problems with the signaling between the ventricles, you get skipped beats. So you feel it and go dum, 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 right? And then you're looking at, is it skipping the beat in a regular fashion or is it skipping the beat on an irregular fashion? Right. And that's going to tell you how severe it is. So you can also feel the blood vessel. If someone's really stressed and tense, it makes everything constrict and tighten. And so you can feel the blood vessel. Does it feel soft? Does it feel like rubbery? Does there some give? Or does it feel like a guitar string? and it feels really hard. So if it feels really hard, you're like, okay, there's some nervous system involvement in there. So if someone comes in with headaches and you feel the pulse and it feels tense like a guitar string, you're going to start thinking nervous system involvement.
Oh, really?
But if somebody comes in and you feel the pulse and you can't find it,
Okay.
it feels really weak. Let's say the pulse is really thin. Well, in order to make the blood vessel fill out, you need blood through there. So if there's a lack of blood or a lack of fluids, the pulse is going to feel much thinner, right? And it's going to have a much weaker beat if somebody's really fatigued. So if someone comes in with headaches, you get the general information, then you feel the pulse. Is it like really forceful, which would indicate a lot of heat, a lot of inflammation? Is it really tight, which would indicate nervous system's tense? Is it really weak, which would mean fatigue? Is it very thin, which means you don't have enough fluids?
Got it.
Right? Then you can look at the tongue. What does the tongue look like?
Okay. What is the tongue? I know there's a lot of whole science.
Well, so if the tongue's really red, what's the tongue? It's a muscle. If it's really red, we got heat. We've got inflammation, right? If it's really pale, you're looking at things like anemia, right? You don't have enough blood, or maybe you don't have enough hemoglobin. So the hemoglobin is the portion of blood that actually binds to oxygen and transport oxygen around the blood, and it's a heme molecule, so iron. So one of the signs of iron deficiency could be headaches and fatigue, right? So then you got to look at, well, is the tongue really pale? When it's kind of orangey on the side, it means really severe. Now, they can go to a Western doctor and do a blood lab, and he says, oh, the red blood cell count is fine. You don't have anemia, because anemia from Western medicine is not enough red blood cells. And they really wouldn't treat it until you need blood transfusions, so they wait till it's really severe. But you can still be having symptoms without needing a blood transfusion, so then we would want to look, well, is this from iron deficiency? Right?
In the blood? Like
in the blood.
Blood cell count's good, maybe the hemoglobin.
Blood cell count's good, you just don't have enough iron.
Yeah.
So if you don't have enough iron, you don't have enough hemoglobin. If you don't have enough hemoglobin, you can't transport oxygen. Yeah. You're going to get tired, you're going to have headaches. Yeah. Right? So that would be part of what Chinese medicine would call the yin qi, or the nutritive qi, the nutritional part of the blood. Yeah. They're closely associated. So you may have enough red blood cells, but that would be a yin qi deficiency. Is you don't have enough iron, you don't have enough B12. One of the symptoms of blood deficiency in Chinese medicine is anxiety. But one of the symptoms of B12 deficiency is anxiety. So do you have a psychiatric problem and you need psych meds, or do you just need some B12? Right? So then we combine the pulse, you look at the tongue. If it's obviously swollen and flabby, you're not metabolizing fluids well, so your body's retaining fluids. If it's got a thick coat on it, from the mouth to the throat, down the esophagus to the stomach is just one tube.
Right, yeah.
So if you've got a lot of sludge in the gut, stuff not digesting, you end up with a really thick coat on the tongue.
Oh, really?
So if you see somebody that's got a pale tongue, pale, not enough blood, right? Not enough nutrition in the blood to make it nice and red, not enough hemoglobin maybe. And then you can look at labs as well, or you can just look at the tongue and the pulse.
So when you're seeing a patient, you ask, what are your symptoms?
And that's just part of the picture.
And you're assessing each system in the body, the blood, the pump, just so you can start to, for yourself, understand which part of the system is disintegrated.
Right. So someone comes in and says, I got headaches. All right. Where's the headache? What's the pain like? Oh, it's right at the top of my head. It's a really sharp pain. What makes it worse? When I'm stressed. Okay, now we're looking at nervous system, right, which would be liver in Chinese medicine. Then you go, right, let me see your tongue. They stick out the tongue and they got a red tongue. Okay, we got a lot of heat and inflammation there. Adrenaline causes heat. So if you're under a lot of nervous system stress and adrenaline, so when you get an adrenaline rush, you get hot. You start sweating. So someone's always got adrenaline going, they're going to have more inflammation, more heat. The tongue's going to be red, right? And then you feel the pulse, and the pulse is really tense, like feels like a guitar string, so you can feel the nervous system's impacting the pulse. So now we've got headaches that are sharp at the top of the head, we've got red tongue, we've got a tight pulse, and then you say to someone, so you've been really frustrated a lot lately? And so now you can see the irritability, right? And so now you're putting the pattern together, and then they may be like, yeah, I'm getting this sharp pain in my rib cage, which is where the phrenic nerve will get compressed by the liver. So now maybe if I have some liver congestion and the liver's swelling up and it's compressing the nerve there, and then that pain will refer up to the neck, right? So they come in and like, oh, I got headaches and I've got this sharp pain here, and you're like, oh, you start putting it together. You're like, oh, the headaches are nervous system stress, irritability, liver congestion. Okay, are you really stressed, like really stressed? So do you drink? Yeah, probably too much, right? So now they're drinking alcohol to deal with their stress. Alcohol creates metabolic heat and inflammation because it's poison, which further stresses the system. So now we know regular alcohol consumption raises baseline cortisol. So your baseline for stress is already elevated, right? Now your liver's getting congestion because if you're drinking, you're probably not eating well. So you may be getting some fatty liver deposits. That's swelling, compressing the nerve, the phrenic nerve at the diaphragm, which is referring pain up to the neck. So if someone comes in and says, I have headaches, you never want to say, here's the headache pill, because the next person might come and say, I have headaches. Where are they? Kind of my whole, I don't know. They won't be described. It's just kind of like my whole head. It's just kind of achy. And you're like, when do you get them? And the worst at the end of the day. And when you're tired, and like, do you crash at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon? Yeah. I can't keep my eyes open by 5 o'clock, which is a kidney adrenal pattern. And then you're like, you feel the pulse, and the pulse feels really weak. And it's doesn't have a lot of force to it, and it feels really thin. And you're like, oh, do you get lightheaded when you stand up quickly? And they're like, yeah. So we're looking at blood pressure issues, right? The pulse is really thin. Maybe you don't have enough blood, so when you stand up really quickly, there's not enough extra blood to get up to the head.
So you get kind of like woozy.
So you get kind of woozy, and then you check their tongue, and it's really pale and it's flabby, and you're like, how's your digestion? They're like, that's terrible. Anything I eat, I get bloating. I don't have an appetite. Different headache. So if you just say to someone, I've got a headache, take this pill.
Which is the Western medicine.
Which is the Western way. Treat all headaches the same.
Get that Advil, get that Tylenol.
Yep, which will make the problem worse because they're toxic to the liver, they're toxic to the gut. So you might get some temporary relief and then erode the integrity of the body further, right? And so you can't have someone come in and say, I've got a headache, or what do I do for headaches? It's like, what kind of headache? What's causing it? The diagnosis is the most important thing. Once you can diagnose, there's lots of different things you can do to treat.
Yeah.
But until you know what the underlying cause of the problem is, you can't treat it.
No.
And then any symptom management is just going to suppress the symptoms, which is going to allow the dysfunction to just continue. So then in the long term, you end up with a worse problem, which is the classic thing of side effects with drugs. They're not really side effects, they're unwanted effects, right? If you have headaches and you take a pill and it gives you, if you have some kind of pain and you take an opioid and it gives you constipation, and now, what happens when you get constipation? Well, now you get all this toxic buildup in the gut. Where does that go? It leaks into the bloodstream. What happens then? You get more inflammation. What happens then? Your pain gets worse, right? So maybe you need something in an emergency, but if you use an emergency technique or an emergency method to treat a chronic problem, it ends up becoming a further problem or exacerbating the problem. So you've got to use the right medicine at the right time and the right duration.
I think for me, I get allergies in the summertime,
right?
And I can't figure it out,
right?
So I'll just get the nasal spray. Helps me so much because they're debilitating.
Right.
I don't think it causes a bigger problem, but in those situations, it's like I can't even work because how debilitating it is. And then
that's actually how I got into this medicine.
Oh, really?
I used to have a couple of different ways. But one of the ways is I had horrible allergies.
Oh, wow.
I'd have these sneezing fits where I'd sneeze like 100 times in a row. And it's just exhausting and
it
miserable.
Is.
And I was congested all the time.
You can't be in public.
So they'd give me sprays for decongestion. And then I would keep getting, like chest infections. So they'd give me antibiotics. And then I'd have all these headaches. So then they'd give me stuff for the headaches. And it was like, but I felt miserable, and I'd go to the doctor and he'd go all his tests and say everything looks fine. It's like, but I feel like shit, right? So when you look at something like allergies, though, there can be lots of things that contribute to them. The kidneys and adrenals can affect allergies. The liver can affect allergies. Your digestive system can affect allergies. So a lot of people, and also to say allergies. So if someone comes in and says, I have really terrible allergies, you don't say, well, here's the allergy medicine.
Right.
What kind of allergy? Do you get skin outbreaks? Right? You can have an allergic reaction which causes like red, itchy skin. Do you get itchy eyes and dripping nose?
Right.
And you sneeze a lot? No. What do you mean allergy? Well, when I eat something, I get a lot of stomach pain, right? So before you can treat an allergy, you got to, what kind of allergy?
Yeah.
And then you got to look at, well, what else is involved? So there are other ways of assessing the body to figure out which system is the one that's not holding up its end of the deal, or which system is dominating the other. So if you have nervous system tension, when you're in a state of stress, you're in fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
The body's primed for survival. It's getting ready to run from danger or to fight a threat, right? That means digestion is not a priority right now.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Thyroid, don't need it right now.
Oh, really? Even the thyroid?
Well, the thyroid's about rest and digest. It's part of the endocrine system. It's helping you with metabolism. We don't need the thyroid going right now. What we need the blood pumping. We need the blood pressure to go up. We need to get all the blood to our arms and our legs so we can fight or run. That means all the stuff that's about rest, digest, recovery, not important, right? We just need to survive right now. So that's the nervous system. And if the nervous system is always on, now, why do you have digestion problems? Do you have some kind of constitutionally weak digestion? I've always had weak digestion since I was a kid. Well, maybe you just came in with a weaker digestive system, or you're somebody that's always under a lot of stress, so the nervous system is always affecting your ability to digest because it's not switching off. And both of those patterns, whether it's a weak digestion, so I can't create the immune cells, right? And my body's under stress. If you've got food leaking through the gut, the gut's always, you got the leaky gut syndrome where you've got the body's immune system's always going, right? Which is going to affect the adrenals, right? And that can contribute towards allergies, because a lot of times when people have airborne allergies, they'll also have some kind of gastrointestinal or food reactivity problem. Right. Or is this an allergy caused by a hypervigilant nervous system, in which case the allergy is your body's hyperactivity, and it's having a disproportionate response to something that should be rather benign.
Got it.
Right.
Okay, can we? We're gonna touch on the hour here. I do want to hit meridians. That's something that I still don't really understand.
Yeah.
And I think they're very beautiful and they're very pretty and they're very un-Western. And could you explain what they are, if they're real, if they actually work? How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with Western science has been looking for channels, and they're like, we can't find them, right? But once again, just like chi is not really energy, it can mean different things in different contexts, and there can be different types of chi, and the chi is just like the animating force and the capacity of the body to function. So weak stomach chi means the stomach's not making enough digestive enzymes to digest food. Weak kidney chi just means the kidneys and adrenals are fatigued. So in Western medicine we call that adrenal fatigue. So the meridians are just like areas of influence. They're just regions of influence, and there's about 60 different channels or meridians. So most people will be familiar with maybe the 12 primary meridians. And those are the ones that you can access through the surface with acupuncture and go to the organs, and they're really the way that the body integrates and connects everything together, right? So when you're looking at the points, the characters for the acupuncture points, like a water radical, and then a radical for something like a cave or a depression or a hollow. And so that gives you the idea that it's something that's fluid and dynamic that changes like water, but it's also something that you can palpate and locate. It's a region. And so they're not necessarily in exactly the same spot on every person, because they're going to move a little bit. And so that's where you have to learn to palpate. And because part of the character for the acupuncture points is like a cave or a hollow or a cavern, there's usually like little spaces that you can feel between the muscles. You can feel little depressions in certain areas, so you have to develop that sensitivity to palpate. So you have a general idea of the points about here, but then you have to move around a little bit to find that little depression. And it's really more, it's just an area of activity that can have some kind of transformative function. So from a Western medicine standpoint, you could have a motor junction, which is where the nerves innervate the muscle, turn the muscle on or off, right? And if you that's an area of high electrical conductivity. So if you take an acupuncture needle and you insert it in near the motor junction, you've got an electrically conductive material in an area of high electrical conductivity, and you'll see the muscle will jump or fasciculate, right? And that would be an acupuncture point. You also have the fascia. The fascia communicates through nervous system and also through chemical signals. And a lot of acupuncture points are in regions of dense fascial bundles. So if you put a needle there and you twist the needle a bit, it antagonizes the fascia a bit, and the fascia will send a signal through the body. So you can see some of the Western maps of the fascia or the connective tissue look very similar to a lot of the acupuncture channel maps.
Oh, really?
And if you look at the character for the acupuncture channels in Chinese medicine, one of them is a character for silk thread, and the other one's a character for like fabric woven through a weaving loom. So it's like this silk fabric that's woven together. So it looks very much like fascia under a microscope. The other type of channel, the low channels, it's a silk thread radical with a fishing net. But the lows are described as being visible and blood flows through them. So they can be certain types of blood vessels and capillaries. So each of the channels is just a region of influence. Each of the points is an area that has a specific influence. Some of that you can describe scientifically in terms of neurological pathways. There's what they call the neurovascular bundles, which are the spaces between the muscles of blood vessels and nerves. You have the fascia as well. Some of it, there's not really a Western equivalent. So you can they've done studies where, you'll stick a needle in the foot that's maybe for the liver, and the liver's responsible for emotional regulation. And then they'll do a functional MRI on the brain, and it'll show the part of the brain that's responsible for emotional regulation light up. So you can see that happening, but you can't necessarily say, well, why is it that point on the foot and not that point on the foot? Now, the Chinese medicine maps will explain that it connects through this organ pathway and it has this function. So not all of it can be explained like anatomically, but if you look at the channels rather than like these tubes that this mysterious energy is flowing through, that they're really just a region of influence in the body, and they overlap each other and they interact with each other. So there's a lot of different channels that run from the most superficial. So the sinew channels don't connect with the organs. The sinew channels are like the fascia or the connective tissue, and they play a big role in how we move and our posture. So you can use a lot of the sinew channels for treating pain and musculoskeletal stuff. And so you can actually diagnose by someone's posture which channels are dysfunctional. If someone comes in really hunched over or somebody's really twisted, right? And they work on the superficial layer. They're not connected to the organs. The primary channels are the regions of influence that connect the organs through the rest of the body and integrate the whole body.
And what do the needles do when you're hitting those points?
Depends on your perspective, whether you're having kind of more of that chi level, energetic level, more subtle level. You're creating like a stimulation to the region, or whether you're having a more just say Western science perspective of, well, you're taking something that's electrically conductive, you're putting it in a region of high electrical conductivity, and then the body's nervous system sends a signal through the body and up to the brain. So different channels work at a very superficial level, can be quite structural and mechanical, and then there's very deep channels which have no Western equivalent, which work really well for like deep-seated genetic problems, hormonal problems, even very good for trauma. So they're described as the kind of the drainage ditches for the floods of life. So you would think of, well, what's a flood of life? Or some big trauma. So like something where your body's flooded with some kind of trauma, you can't process it, you can't take it in, you don't want that getting into the organs and affecting the organ health, so you have to drain it off somewhere. And so you can use those channels for treating like repressed, latent, emotional pathogens from trauma. So a pathogen's not just a material, like it would be in Western medicine. You can have a pathogenic emotion as well. And that would just be like a repetitive emotional pattern you can't get out of. So you can be looking at, you can be affecting base material structure, or that you're working on the level of the chi or the functional capacity of the body in a more subtle way. And then each point's going to have a different function.
Okay, interesting. We're at the hour here. One last thing I want to just kind of ask, what are some practical takeaways people can kind of get? Is there like, I can think about like looking at your tongue, seeing if it's too pale or too red. Are there any things that people could do on their own that they don't have to, they should probably be learning these things for themselves?
I think
right?
the biggest thing that people need to kind of start thinking about is the body's an integrated whole.
Yeah.
Everything affects everything.
Yeah.
Your thoughts, your state of mind, your thoughts affect the physiology of the body. The physiology, the base functioning of the body affects the mind. So you don't want to be looking at yourself as being like having a mental problem or a physical problem, but there's some part of the whole in some way the body's disintegrating. How do we bring it back to integrity, right? And so there are a lot of lifestyle things people can do that the body has an innate capacity to heal itself when it's given the right environment. So sleep is super important, right? So if you think about the cycle of yin and yang, yin just means still and quiet, yang means active.
Yeah.
So the nighttime when it's dark is a yin time, so then we should be still at night. And the daytime when the sun's out is a yang time, so that's when we should be active. So it's not just about how much sleep you get, but when you sleep. So people should be asleep by 10 o'clock at night because now we're going into yin. We need to be still because the liver cycle in the Chinese system is between 1 and 3. So and the liver detoxes the blood. So if you're not in a deep state of sleep at 1 and 3, your liver's not cleansing the blood, right? So the sleep is super important. And not just how much sleep you get, but when you actually sleep. You want to be asleep early, get up early. So you wake up as the yang is beginning to rise in the morning. You're going to go to sleep as the yin is getting, around 9:30, 10 o'clock, as we're going into a more yin cycle. So the sleep is really important, and there's no amount of supplements or herbs that's going to compensate for not getting enough sleep.
Yeah.
The diet's super important because the diet's where you're getting that nutritive chi, that ability to nourish your body. So you can be sleeping well, but if you're not getting food, your body literally doesn't have the material resources to make new cells. So most people know processed food's terrible. Your body doesn't know how to digest it. A lot of it's like a food-like substance.
Yeah, seriously.
So when it hits the stomach, your stomach doesn't have the enzymes or the chemicals to break that stuff down, so it goes undigested. It becomes a pathogen, so instead of nourishing your body, it becomes a burden to the body. That creates patterns of inflammation, creates adrenal stress, so then people can't sleep well. So you've got to have good sleep, you've got to have good diet, you've got to have good exercise, because there are certain beneficial hormones that are released through strenuous exercise, lifting something heavy. You get the blood moving, so you help blood flow. You want to breathe well, so any kind of good breathing practice, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation. I think having some kind of breath work that helps calm the nervous system and teach you how to breathe properly is critical, because good, calm breathing doesn't just oxygenate the body, it doesn't just relax the body, but it also helps calm the nervous system down so you can sleep well and you can digest well. Because if you're not calm and relaxed when you're eating, the nervous system is tense, you don't digest well. So a lot of people eat in front of the computer or they eat on the go. You're not going to digest the food well. So even if you're eating healthy food, if you're stressed when you're eating it, or you're eating it when you're doing a lot of mental activity, it won't digest well. So you can say sleep is important, diet is important, exercise is important, breathing is important, but it's also important that that's in that yin-yang cycle. We want to be sleeping during a yin time when it gets dark at night, 9:30, 10, right? We want to be exercising during the yang time. We don't want to be exercising at midnight. We're supposed to be still and calm then. So we want better to do our exercise early in the morning. We want to be digesting in a relaxed state. We want to be eating in a relaxed state. We want to make sure we're breathing well and we're doing full complete breathing, which helps support the posture. So a lot of things people can do to help themselves: Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation, some kind of strenuous lifting weights to help strengthen the body. Get good sleep, get your sleep discipline down is critically important. Don't eat anything out of a plastic bag or a plastic bottle or some kind of package. Eat just whole natural food, right? And then the spiritual component or the mental emotional component is you've got to have good social connections. You've got to be doing something that you enjoy.
Yeah.
Because if you feel disconnected from people or you're not having some kind of pleasure in life, you create this tension and stress and depression in the body.
Yeah.
And so that's not going to help the digestion. It's not going to help you sleep. So rather than thinking about, well, what pill or what herb or what supplement can I take to help my immune system or my headaches, everyone can work on their sleep discipline. Everyone can eat, even if you're like not an expert at, like, you don't need a nutritionist. Just don't eat stuff out of a packet. Whole fruits and vegetables, as much stuff that you can cook yourself as possible. Nothing that's been overly processed, right? Lots of people, you can go on YouTube and learn some meditation. You can go to a yoga or a qigong or a tai chi class. That's accessible to a lot of people. Making sure you're doing something in your life that you enjoy, that you're making good social connections. Because no matter what disease you have and no matter what state it is, you're going to have to do all of those things anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Alcohol consumption is not great, obviously. If you're going to have a drink, maybe on the weekend you have one with friends over dinner so you relax, not using it to self-medicate.
Yeah, stressful drinking, yeah.
You know, not drinking too much coffee. I mean, coffee is not great because it increases adrenaline output. So if you've got anxiety, you have difficulty sleeping. So a lot of things people can do. If you had good sleep, good diet, good exercise, you're finding something that you enjoy, you're doing some kind of breath work, 80% of all symptoms are going to be resolved.
Yeah.
And then taking care of the other 20% is not too difficult.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think I learned a lot myself. I didn't even know some of this stuff myself, which is
yeah.
pretty dope.
I mean, it's easy for people to get lost because, I mean,
yeah, this is pretty intense.
There's so much you can learn from the medicine standpoint, but there's really simple things people can do for themselves.
Yeah.
And rather than trying to go to a health food store or look up on Google what supplement to take for my immune system or because I'm fatigued, get the basic things down that any good holistic practitioner is going to tell you to do, and then find someone that can help guide you through the last little bit. And you can have some constitutional stuff you're born with that you need help with. There's 2 supplements I think I mentioned to you that I think anyone could take that's perfectly safe.
That's great. All right, let's hear it.
There's one called Ion Gut Support, ION.
Ion Gut Support. Oh yeah.
It helps repair
Zach
so it helps repair the membranes in the small intestine. Everyone's got some kind of membrane damage from antibiotics, from corticosteroids, from glyphosate and the pesticide. Everyone should be taking that. And it doesn't interact with any medication. It doesn't interact with any other herbs. It's a liquid. It's not expensive. Doesn't taste horrible. And everyone needs that, in my opinion. And then any kind of digestion problems, just some broad spectrum digestive enzymes can be helpful. Because if you're not breaking the food down, you're not able to extract the beneficial nutrients from it. And you can get something that's rare. You can get different types that maybe have more hydrochloric acid if you have trouble with protein, or a more broad spectrum if you're having trouble with plant cellulose or sugars. Yeah. But a broad spectrum digestive enzyme, they don't accumulate in the bloodstream, so you can't really have a build-up. They become problematic over time. They don't interact with other medications or botanicals. You take them right before you eat. If you have any kind of gas, bloating, indigestion, they can be really helpful. They're not going to fix the underlying problem, so you still want to work on the underlying problem. But so many people have digestion issues, and those are 2 products I could give to just about anyone and feel safe that it's not going to cause them any more harm. The Iron Gut Health will start helping heal some of the underlying problem, but it's not going to treat any specific symptoms. Yeah. So that would be a good start. That's something that I would put just about any of my patients on. And then for the rest of it, you just want to work on the basic lifestyle things. If you get those down, before you go start spending a bunch of money on supplements and herbs and all this kind of stuff, take care of the stuff that's free that you can do for yourself, and then you probably don't need to take as many other supplements and herbs, and you'll get more benefit from them. But have somebody who's licensed and knows what they're doing to help guide you in what to take, so you're not just doing a shotgun approach and trying to take a little bit of everything.
No, seriously. Because
sometimes this on its own is okay and this on its own is okay, but they don't interact well together. So then people get frustrated because they're like, well, I've tried everything and nothing worked. And it was because they didn't know how to combine them together properly, or they were just taking too much and the body's overwhelmed. So it's better to not just kind of load your cabinet up with supplements and herbs and just think, well, if this is good, if a little bit's good, more's better, and my friend said this was good. And what ends up happening, you spend a bunch of money, it may not help you, and then you get even more discouraged because you're like, man, I've been really trying to take care of my health and it just doesn't seem to be getting better. And you may have missed just the kernel, the root cause there. And then you can do something really simple to fix that, and then all your other symptoms will correct themselves. So a lot of times you don't want to chase symptoms, you understand the underlying root cause, and if you fix that, then often that will be the root cause of maybe a dozen symptoms. So you treat the one thing and the dozen symptoms goes away. So you don't have to take 12 products for the 12 symptoms. You just fix the one problem and then it'll correct everything else. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Jay.
You're welcome.
Hope you guys got a lot of info on that. Appreciate you guys. We'll catch you on another one.